lovely people, welcome to my channel. If you're a new subscriber, thank you for subscribing to my channel, and welcome back if you're an old subscriber. Thank you guys for sticking around with me. So today I'm going to be taking you guys through how I made this beautiful mermaid wedding gown for a client last year. This gown was one of the projects I really loved working on, and I'm going to take you guys through everything, very detailed video. So these are the things you're going to need. You can take time to screenshot, you can pause it and look through. Also, this tutorial is going to be divided into two parts because I don't want my videos to be so long. So part one is going to be drafting and cutting, and then I'm going to post a part two, which will be the stitching and then the detailing of the gown. So without much further ado, let's just get straight into the video. First off, I'll be drafting from shoulder to her tapering line, and the line that I'm just marking down now is my client's waistline. And to get this line, you're just going to measure from the waist to the tapering line, and I use the edge of the brown paper, which is the down part of the brown paper, to serve as the tapering line. So from the waistline to the tapering line is 17 inches, and the line that I just marked above is the shoulder line, and the shoulder to the waist is also 17 inches, which I've marked down and I've labeled that down. So the next thing to do is to mark her across front, and her across front was I think 13. I marked that down, and the next thing that I'm doing is marking her shoulder to her nipple and shoulder to underbust. And as you can see, I'm doing the same thing across the whole brown paper, and this is because I'll be drafting both the front and then the back on the same brown paper. So that is what I'm doing. I've gone ahead to label the horizontal lines that I just drew. The next thing to do is to draft the armhole. And in order to get your armhole, you're going to divide your bust measurement by 6, and you're going to add 1 or 1.5. But with this gown, with the nature of the gown, I don't need any armhole, I don't need any sleeve, but I'm drafting this from scratch, so I mean the beginners or anybody who comes across my video won't be confused. I could have just started drafting from the chest line, but I'm doing this for the sake of this tutorial. But ideally I don't need any armhole because the gown is strapless. So now that I'm done drafting the armhole curve and all that, the next thing to do is to mark my darts. And the darts, you know how to get the darts, your nipple to nipple measurement, you're going to divide that by 2 and you're going to mark that down. My client's nipple to nipple is 8, so 8 divided by 2 is 4, and then you're going to mark that on the chest line and on the waistline as well. So I'm taking 1 inch on both sides of the straight line that I just drew in order to achieve my darts. So this particular design, I'm using the shoulder dart, and what I'm doing next is to mark 1 inches up and 1 inch down, because I don't want to have any pointy edges around the bust point. From there, what I'm doing next is marking the bust radius, and this will allow you to know whether you're going to show cleavage or not. And this is a wedding gown and you want to look as decent as possible. So my clients wouldn't want to show cleavage, so in order not to show cleavage, you can either go up between 1.5 to 2 inches upwards, so you can have a full coverage. I think I went up 1 inch or half for my client's design. I don't remember, but after I'm done, I'm marking 1 inch on both sides as well to achieve the dots for the upper part. Then I can go ahead and draft the sweetheart design for the neckline. After shaping the neckline, you can now go ahead and connect it to the armhole, and it connects nicely, and you can see the design or the shape coming out nicely. Now what I'm doing is to connect the dots to the waistline, and I think we are practically almost done with the front part. Now it's time for you to transfer the horizontal measurements. Think my client's bust was 35, so you're going to divide that into 4, and then you add the that's measurements that you've taken out. So if you took 2 inches out, you make sure you're going to add that back, and that is what I've done, and I've marked that down. So the waist measurement, you're also going to do the same thing. You took 2 inches out, you're going to add it back, and then you connect it nicely, and then you're done with the front. Moving on to the back, I'm just drawing a straight line, which is the zipper line, but this gown is not going to have a zip. This gown is going to be tied at the back, so I'm going to have eyelets with this long rope tied at the back. I don't know if you guys, but you would see that at the end of the video. So what I'm marking down is 4 inches, which is the nipple to nipple measurement. I'm going to use that same measurement to help me draft the dots at the back. So that is what I'm doing, and normally drafting the back is quite easier as compared to the front, because the back is usually straight and doesn't have any drama going on as compared to the front. So I'm done drafting with the back, and I'm going ahead to label all the parts before I forget what is what. And it's very essential to label your pattern so you don't get confused at any point. So now that I'm done, I just went ahead to transfer my horizontal measurements, and I'm just canceling out the lines that are not needed so I don't get confused. So I'm done with the back, and like I said, I'm not going to use a zipper for this gown, so I need to take away some inches from the back to enable me snatch my clients as much as I want. So I think I took about 2 inches off the back, the upper part of the back, and I think the waist. So this is going to run down through to her hip line. I'm going to loop the back from the upper part to the hip line. I think that's what I want to do. So I'm taking away, I think, 2 inches from the upper part, 3 inches on the waist. I don't remember the measurements, but you should take between 2 inches or more depending on how snatched you want your client to look. So now that I'm done with both front and back, I'm going to move to the skirt part of the gown. The line I just drew horizontally is the hip line, and the hip line is usually 8 to 9 inches from the waist. The next thing I'm doing is to mark her hip measurement. Her hip was, I think, 44. So divide that by 4, and then you're going to mark that down and connect it to the waist. There's an excess at the upper part because I'm not drafting any dots for the skirt part of the gown, so you don't have to worry if you have any excess. After you join the dots and everything for the upper part, is going to correspond to the skirt. So usually the skirt is very simple to construct. I'm done with the front. I'll move on to construct the back of the skirt as well. So the same thing you do to the front, you're going to do the same thing to the back. You're going to mark your hip line, and then you're just going to connect it to your waist, and then you're good to go. So just as I did for the back, the upper part of the back, I'm going to take away some inches from the waist to the hip line, because like I said, I'm not going to have any zipper for this gown. So I think I took about 2 inches from the hip line. Yeah, so that's the inches that I'm marking, and I'm connecting it to the knee waistline. Yeah, so you should have something like this. As I'm done drafting, what I'm doing next is to highlight all the parts that I'm supposed to cut with a paint chalk, and I went ahead to cut them down. After I'm done cutting, I'm going to move on to cut on my fabric. So I'll need 2 pieces each for the lace, and then the other piece is going to serve as a lining. So I folded my bridal satin into 4. So I'm going to have two of each of the patterns that I'm cutting. So with the single patterns, I'm going to have 4 each. I don't know if it makes sense, guys, but you just have to fold your satin into 4. So one is going to serve as a lining for your lace, and then one is going to serve as a lining for your main, like the whole garment itself. I think as I'll stitch, you're going to understand what I mean. So I did the same thing for my fabric interface. I divided my fabric, I folded my fabric interface into 4, and I did cut all the patterns as well. And I'm going to go ahead to iron this on each of the patterns. This is to give your fabric structure, is to give your fabric a little stability, is to make your fabric stronger, because the satin alone is a bit, like soft. So the fabric interface is just to help it become more solid. Moving on to the main deal of this tutorial is the lace part. So this part can be very tricky, and you really need to take your time before cutting the lace. You have to ensure that everything is laying down symmetric, because you don't want your gown looking crooked, you don't want the designs looking anyhow. You want everything to come out perfectly. This is a wedding gown, and you want everything to look as perfect as possible. So that is what I'm doing. I'm trying to make sure that the designs are looking, symmetric, so that whatever I cut for the front is going to match up with the back, and then the sides are also going to match equally. So when I line the lace, the front and then the back, as you can see, the sides are matching, the designs are matching perfectly, and that is what you want to achieve. After you're done cutting all your patterns, the next thing you need to do is to break your beads on all the allowances of your lace. So this step is very important, because it's going to enable you have a smooth sewing, because if you don't break the beads are going to break your needle as you're stitching, and it can be very annoying, it can be very difficult, it's going to slow you down. So you have to make sure you break the beads on the allowances, only the allowances. So if you have 1 inch allowance, you make sure you're going to break the beads on 1 inch allowance only. If it's half inch, you're going to break the beads around half inch allowance, and then you're going to enjoy your stitching. You're going to have a smooth stitching and everybody's going to be happy. Yeah, so that is what I'm doing. And after, I'm going to move on to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch. So watch out for part 2, guys, and thanks for watching. I'll see you. Bye.